Hey, welcome back. For this deep dive, we're going to try something a bit different. It's kind of a concentrated dose of thought.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you sent us 100 quotes that will change your life from Library Mindset.
Right.
And, it seems like a pretty quick read, right? Just a bunch of quotes. But we really dove in.
Yeah, we did.
And we found, some surprisingly sharp little insights, like nestled in these short statements. They really got us thinking about everything from how we're living to the goals that actually matter to those habits that we build that kind of make us who we are.
That's a great point. And I think the real key here is that, it's more than just a passive listening experience.
Right.
It's really about, grabbing some serious mental fuel, distilled down to its essence. Our aim today is to kind of unpack these nuggets of wisdom, explore what makes them tick, and then most importantly, see how you can actually take these simple lines and use them to really understand your own life better and the choices that you make. It's about actively engaging with some seriously concentrated insight.
I love that.
Yeah.
Mental fuel, that's exactly it.
Okay.
So let's just dive right in. There's this theme that really jumped out at me. Living with real intention, like almost a sense of urgency. And Benjamin Franklin, he kind of kicks us off with this thought, right? Some people die at 25 and aren't buried until 75.
Yeah.
Ooh, kind of paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does.
It makes you think about just going through the motions, existing,
Yeah.
but not really engaging. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think what's so potent about Franklin's imagery there is how it frames that lack of purposeful living, not just as a passive state, but almost like this premature death of potential. It's a powerful reminder that potential unfulfilled is a form of loss in itself. It's like this forfeiture of what could have been. And so it forces us to really ask ourselves, are we actively shaping our lives, or are we just letting routine or maybe even unspoken fears dictate our path? What actually defines a lived life, for you?
Yeah, and that sense of urgency, that now or never vibe, it gets like amplified by Paulo Coelho. He says, one day you'll wake up and there won't be any more time to do things you've always wanted. Do it now. No rain checks, right? Like the universe isn't going to give us a do-over. It's like a pretty direct nudge to stop waiting.
It is. If we link that back to Franklin, they're both hitting on the same fundamental truth. Time is not infinite. Coelho's emphasis on now cuts through any tendency to procrastinate or live in this constant state of future planning. It's about aligning what we're doing today with our deepest desires before that opportunity is just gone.
And then there's this line, and it's almost stark in its simplicity. It's from an unknown source, but it really hit me. Life will not postpone our death, so let us not postpone our life. It's like a double negative, but it lands with so much force.
It does. Stripping away the layers, the core message is undeniable, right? The inevitability of our mortality.
Yeah.
Well, it puts our choices about how we live into sharp relief. There's no delay on the one, so why impose one on the other? What's particularly thought-provoking about these first three quotes, when you consider them together?
It's the combined weight for me. It's not just about living a long time. It's about really, truly being present in this moment, right? And not letting time slip by just waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about what drives us, our goals.
Okay.
John D. Rockefeller Sr., he famously said, if your only goal is to become rich, you will never achieve it. And that feels kind of paradoxical, in a world that's like obsessed with wealth. Why do you think he said that?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think Rockefeller's insight here suggests that real sustainable achievement and even financial success comes from something deeper, a sense of purpose, a desire to contribute something meaningful to the world. If we just focus on piling up wealth, it can be empty,
Yeah.
It lacks that intrinsic motivation that helps us face challenges and keeps us going over the long term. It's almost as if by aiming for something beyond just money, you actually create this more powerful engine for achievement.
Yeah.
With wealth sometimes just being the byproduct.
It's like how they say you can't chase happiness directly, but you find it when you're doing things that matter to you.
Exactly.
So, okay, Robert T. Kiyosaki, he offers a slightly different take. He says, the single most powerful asset we all have is our mind. If it is trained well, it can create enormous wealth. So, will is still there, but it's like the outcome of growing intellectually.
Right. And with Kiyosaki, he's really emphasizing the power we have to shape our outcomes through learning, constantly developing our minds. But, and this is where it connects back to Rockefeller, if all that mental training is only aimed at getting rich, it becomes really limiting. A well-trained mind can do so much more. solve problems, innovate, understand the world deeply.
So it's not just about the money, but what you can do with a sharp mind, the opportunities you can see.
Exactly.
Okay, then Azim Premji throws this curveball. If people are not laughing at your goals are too small. I love that one. It pushes me to think big, What's the message there?
Premji's quote really gets to the core of ambition and our fear of judgment. Truly big goals, they often stretch beyond what seems possible or conventional at first, which is probably why they get some skepticism or even laughter, right?
Right.
It's a call to embrace that visionary thinking, to not be limited by what others think we can achieve or even what we initially believe about ourselves. It suggests that real impact requires a certain boldness, a willingness to aim high.
So it's not just setting goals, it's setting the right kind of goals, right?
Yeah.
Fueled by something more than just wanting to be rich.
Absolutely.
Driven by a commitment to keep learning and maybe even pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones a bit.
I love that.
Okay, let's move on to something really foundational. Habits.
Right.
F.M. Alexander put it bluntly. People do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. It's like this chain reaction, right?
Yeah.
With huge implications for, how our lives actually unfold.
What this quote really highlights is the impact of our consistent actions, those things we often do without even thinking on the entire trajectory of our lives. It's not about those big one-time events. It's about the small, repetitive choices we make every day. What's fascinating is how those habits compound over time, either pushing us towards the things we want with surprising speed or almost invisibly pulling us away from them.
And Jim Rohn kind of echoes that idea. Motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. So it's the difference between that initial spark and the, sustained effort that really gets you somewhere.
It is. Motivation can be fleeting, often depending on things outside of us or how we happen to feel that day. But strong habits, well, they're like a reliable engine.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. Motivation might get you to sign up for a marathon, but it's the habit of training, even when you don't feel like it, that actually gets you across that finish line.
And then Aristotle, he steps in with, where what we repeatedly do, excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. So he's saying excellence itself is really about building the right habits.
Yes, and Aristotle's perspective is so timeless. He's saying excellence isn't some big one-time thing, but the result of practicing virtuous habits consistently.
Yeah.
It means that mastery in any area of life, well, it's built step by step through those ingrained patterns of behavior. It's the small things we do again and again that define us.
Michael Jordan just cut straight through,
Yeah.
right? He says, if you quit once, it becomes a habit. Never quit.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about some serious mental toughness.
Right. Jordan's quote speaks volumes about how those negative habits can take root and how important it is to build resilience.
Yeah.
It's a warning about letting those little setbacks turn into patterns of giving up. The starkness of never quit speaks to developing mental strength, a refusal to just cave into the easy option of quitting. Thinking about all these perspectives on habits, what stands out to you?
I think it's just the power of recognizing that our daily routines, the things we do almost automatically, are actually shaping our future, whether we realize it or not.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's turn inward a bit. Let's talk about self-awareness and personal growth. Onko Wariku offers this interesting gauge. If you are comfortable dancing in public without alcohol or drugs, you are at peace with who you are. That's an unusual way to think about self-acceptance, right?
It is, isn't it? What's insightful about Wariku's observation is that link he makes between external inhibition and internal comfort. The ability to express yourself freely and genuinely without needing those external crutches suggests you're deeply comfortable with who you are. It makes us think. When do we seek validation from outside sources? When do we rely on things to feel comfortable in social settings?
S. McNutt brings a gentler perspective. Fall in love with taking care of yourself. Fall in love with becoming the best version of yourself, but with patience, with compassion and respect to your own journey. That emphasis on self-compassion feels really important, in a world that's always pushing us to be better, better, better.
I agree. Personal growth shouldn't be about harsh self-criticism or constantly chasing some perfect version of ourselves. McNutt's quote reminds us to be kind and understanding with ourselves as we grow, It acknowledges that it's a journey and it's different for everyone, and self-compassion makes that journey so much easier.
Now, Israel Zangwill, he reminds us that self-improvement never really ends. He says, you should examine yourself daily. If you find faults, you should correct them. When you find none, you should try even harder. That last part is interesting. Even when we think we're doing well, we should still be pushing further.
It's true. Zhanglo's quote really shows us that self-improvement isn't a finish line, but an ongoing process. It's a daily commitment to reflect, find areas for growth, and then work on them. That idea of pushing further even when we don't see obvious flaws, well, it suggests we're dedicated to refining ourselves, striving for excellence that goes beyond just fixing mistakes.
And then the Dalai Lama gives us some perspective on comparison. He says, the goal is not to be better than the other man, but your previous self. It's about our own progress, not getting caught up in competing with others.
Right. This quote wisely shifts our focus away from comparing ourselves to others, which is so often unhelpful.
Right.
And it points us towards something much more meaningful, our own personal evolution. The emphasis is on constantly improving and trying to be better than we were yesterday. So reflecting on these different ideas about self-awareness and growth, what resonates most with you?
I think it's about finding that balance between accepting who I am right now and still having that drive to evolve
Mhm.
and, keeping my focus on my own path, not getting distracted by comparing myself to others.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Okay, let's get into something that can be a bit tricky. Relationships and how outside influences impact us. Ernest Hemingway offers this simple but profound advice. When people talk, listen completely. Most people never listen.
It's such a simple statement, but it really gets to the heart of communication and building connections. Really listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how often we're actually thinking about our response instead of absorbing what the other person is saying. That really gets in the way of understanding.
Okay, now Robert Greene gives us two very different and maybe even a bit strategic viewpoints. He says, never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies.
Yeah.
And also, always say less than necessary. These are different. They really make you think about the dynamics between people.
They do. Green's quotes offer a very specific lens for looking at relationships, maybe a pragmatic lens, you could say, even a little Machiavellian. The first one, it suggests being cautious about blind trust and maybe seeing a use for those we consider adversaries. The second one, it's about being careful with our words and understanding the power of holding back information. These are definitely on the more strategic end of the spectrum when it comes to relationships, and it's important to consider where they might apply and where they might not align with our own personal values. What are your initial thoughts on these ideas?
Well, to be honest, they feel a little calculated, I have to say.
Yeah.
But they do make you think about those hidden layers in interactions.
Yeah.
Like, are there hidden agendas at play? Even if it's not how I personally approach relationships, it's good to be aware of.
I agree.
Okay, on a brighter note, Oprah Winfrey advises, surround yourself only with people who are going to lift you higher. That resonates with me. It's about nurturing positive relationships.
Oprah's quote is all about the positive impact of our social circle on our growth and well-being.
Yeah.
It's about choosing to spend time with people who support us, encourage us, and inspire us to be our best. It's a stark contrast to Green's approach, really highlighting how many different ways there are to view and navigate our connections.
So relationships are complex.
Yeah.
It's about that balance between connecting genuinely, being aware of the complexities, and building that inner circle that lifts us up.
It is.
Now let's switch gears and talk about action, specifically decision-making and overcoming that inertia that can keep us stuck. Richard Templer says, better to jump and make a mistake than sit there too frightened to make a move. That really speaks to the fear of failure, doesn't it?
It does. Templer's quote champions that proactive approach, the learning that happens from experience, even when we mess up.
Mm-hmm.
It confronts that fear of failure head on, that tendency to wait for the perfect moment, which never really comes. And what's interesting is how inaction itself has risks. It's a missed opportunity for growth and progress.
Greg McKeown gives us a very practical tool for making decisions. He says, if it isn't a clear yes, then it's a clear no. That feels like a way to protect our time and energy from getting spread too thin.
It is. Matteo's principle is about being more intentional with our commitments. By setting that high bar for agreement, we avoid overcommitting and stretching ourselves too thin. It's about recognizing that saying no can be just as powerful as saying yes, maybe even more so.
And then Naval Ravikant, he makes it even simpler. If you cannot decide, the answer is no. So hesitation itself is a signal that we're not really aligned with something.
Exactly. A Ravikant statement drives home that point that when we can't decide, it usually means it's not a true priority.
Mm.
It's a nudge to say no to those opportunities that don't spark a clear yes, so we can focus on what truly matters.
And Walt Disney, he cuts through all the overthinking. He says, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing.
Right.
No more getting lost in endless planning.
Yeah.
It's about taking action.
Disney's quote is a direct call to overcome procrastination and analysis paralysis. It's that reminder that the best way to learn and adapt is by doing, not by endlessly preparing. What resonates with you most from these approaches to decision-making and taking action?
For me, it's that combination of overcoming the fear of messing up by taking the leap and then using that yes or no filter to guide my actions.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the power of our mindset. Charlie Chaplin offers this beautifully optimistic thought: you'll never find a rainbow if you're looking down.
It's such a beautiful image, isn't it?
It is.
Chaplin's quote shows us how much our perspective shapes our reality. If we have a negative or pessimistic outlook, we can miss the beauty, the possibilities, the good things that are all around us. It's about cultivating that sense of hope, that open-mindedness, to see the bright side and the positive potential in everything.
Seneca gives us a bit of a reality check about our own minds. He says, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. How true is that, right? We create our own anxieties and problems in our heads.
It's so true. Seneca is speaking to that very human tendency to anticipate problems, to dwell on what might go wrong. And we often blow things out of proportion in our minds. It's a reminder to ground ourselves in the present moment and not get lost in those what-if scenarios that might never even happen.
There's this Japanese proverb that links our mental and physical states. It says, only staying active will make you want to live 100 years.
I love that one. It really highlights that connection between physical activity and mental well-being. Staying active not only keeps our bodies healthy, but it can also make us feel more alive and vibrant mentally.
And then we have Marcus Aurelius reminding us of the power of inner peace. He says, the nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength.
Aurelius is pointing to the resilience and strength that come from mental clarity and managing our emotions effectively. When our mind is calm and focused, we make better decisions, we can concentrate better, and we have the strength to face challenges more easily. What stands out to you from these different ideas about mindset and perspective?
I think it's a powerful reminder that how we feel inside really shapes how we experience the world outside, and that working on a positive and calm inner state, well, that's a huge source of strength.
I agree.
Okay, let's wrap up by talking about the one thing that's always certain: change. Tony Robbins puts it simply, by changing nothing, nothing changes.
That's a powerful statement about the role of change in our lives, both personally and in the world around us.
Right.
It challenges that passive hope that things will magically get better on their own and reminds us that we have to be the ones to initiate change if we want things to be different.
And Jim Rohn builds on that idea. Your life does not get better by chance, it gets better by change. It's on us to make those changes happen.
Ron is emphasizing that real, positive change doesn't just happen randomly.
Yeah.
It's an active process. It requires us to step out of our comfort zones, to adopt new behaviors and perspectives.
Okay, Robin Sharma offers a more, I guess you could say, realistic view of change. He says change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end. It reminds us that transformation isn't always easy or straightforward.
Right. Sharma's observation gives us a really helpful framework for understanding how change actually happens. It acknowledges that initial resistance, that messy middle part where things can feel uncertain, and then the potential for a positive outcome when we make it through. It's a message of patience and perseverance.
And finally, Heraclitus offers this timeless wisdom about the nature of change itself. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man.
Beautiful, isn't it?
It is.
Heraclitus captures that constant flow of reality so perfectly. It's a reminder that we can't resist change and that learning to adapt and accept the impermanence of things is crucial. Looking at these different ideas about change, what's the biggest takeaway for you?
I think it's the clear understanding that change is not just something that happens to us, but something we need to embrace. It's a catalyst for growth and progress. And while it can be hard, the potential rewards are so worth it. So, as we've made our way through these 100 quotes, some really powerful and connected themes have come up.
Yeah, they have.
We talked about living with intention and urgency, setting goals that matter, building those small habits that shape us, being self-aware and kind to ourselves as we grow, navigating relationships, taking action, having a positive mindset, and embracing change.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how these diverse quotes come together to create this tapestry of wisdom.
It is.
They offer really practical advice that touches on so many important aspects of life. They remind us that living a truly fulfilling life takes conscious effort, constant self-reflection, and a willingness to learn, grow, and adapt along the way.
So as you reflect on all this, what's one quote that you're going to really try to live by in the coming days? And how do you think that one small shift could impact other areas of your life? Or maybe there's an idea here that really challenges your current beliefs. What can you learn by exploring that discomfort? It's about taking these nuggets of wisdom and using them to reflect and then actually take action.
That's the key. The real power of these quotes comes from letting them resonate, challenge our thinking, and guide our choices going forward.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the wisdom of 100 quotes that will change your life. We hope you'll revisit these ideas and see how they can apply to your own journey. Until next time.